Okay, welcome back. We are on to lesson number 7 of 8. We are working on audio now. We're still working on the same video that we were working on before with multicam sequence. This is where we left off. We have 2 audio tracks coming out of here. We have a bunch of cuts, and my version stopped cutting about halfway through. I just kind of gave up on it, but hopefully you worked all the way through there and stuff. We're going to pretend this is a really good shot here. So to work in audio, you can jump on over to the audio workspace, which I would recommend. Most of your audio tools are over here, including Essential Sound, which has a whole bunch of effects that you can add to your audio and kind of sweeten the sound and stuff. Also, we can do a bunch of effects. It's a little bit similar to color grading, where you can use the Lumetri color panel, and you can also work with effects inside the effects panel, dragging and dropping those things individually. That's kind of how Essential Sound works. You can find a whole lot of the things that are in Essential Sound as separate effects inside the program. So if you know what you're looking for and stuff, you can probably find that way. Also, if you came from an older version of Premiere, you can still work the way that you're probably used to, and just searching for maybe parametric equalizer, which does exist in Premiere, drag and drop that into your audio clip, and that should work for you. You just make your adjustments in there and stuff. But Essential Sound is an all-in-one, kind of has everything that you need, or almost everything that you need there. Okay, so here's where we are with our sound. We have looks like 8 channels, which is, yeah, it says right there, 8 channels, which is way more than what we need if we're going to export out a stereo sound video. So to cut that down a little bit, we can head on over to our master track here, and you see where it says 8. Click that little button there, and we can adjust what our final output is going to be. So now we've gone from 8 channels to 2 channels, and over here in my audio monitor, I can see that it went from 8 bars that we can see there to 2 bars. So just the 2 channels that we're seeing left and right now. And if I listen to this, it doesn't sound very good. So it's still got like a bunch of audio sources all kind of mashed together, all kind of competing with various levels of audio quality. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the best version of audio for the performance, the actual song that's there, and then I'm going to find the best sounding audio for the crowd noise. So I already did that. So I went through cameras 1 through 4. Those are all of the angles that last the entirety of the song. And then I found that, which cameras did I find? It looks like the side stage and the wide shot back camera were my choices there. And I went ahead and used the sync function in the timeline, and used audio sync, and then also used these markers that I already had placed. So that audio sync took a little while. I just did that in the background. Here's where we are after doing that. We have two audio sources, one of them considerably better than the other one, but the other one has a little bit more of that crowd noise. And then these 2 tracks that I don't really care about at all. They sound really bad. We just used them to sync up our stuff. Now we could delete these things. We can separate audio and video. You see how they're attached here in a couple of different ways. We can right click here and go to unlink, and now they are unlinked. I can click them separately. Or you can also unlink everything on your timeline by clicking this little button here where it says linked selection. If you unclick that, now anything that we click will be separated. It will also show you how far mismatched these things are. Like this belongs to this, but the audio is 8 seconds and 25 frames ahead of where it should be if we wanted it to be synced up. We could just delete these things that way, but maybe I want to bring them back for some reason. I don't think I want to, but it's probably a good idea just to keep those around. So I can mute these tracks by pressing this M button on the audio track, and that means that I won't be able to hear these even at export. I think that I think I might, yeah, I did the two channel thing on the other performance timeline, so I'm going to have to go ahead and do that again. All right, now if I listen to it, doesn't sound great because that the audio that has good good quality sound for the crowd is much too loud. The other track, if I just solo that out, it's going to sound nice and clean on the guy talking. Well, you know, as clean as we have, but that the audience is just a little bit too loud. So what I can do here is I could go as far as the audio mixer, but instead I just like to work on the timeline initially, and we can do that actually with the pen tool and just the selection tool. So if you see this very small line that runs throughout any given audio clip, that is the audio gain. And if we turn this up or down, you can see the decibel area there. So the higher the number, the louder your audio is. So if I want to turn this down, maybe I turn it down minus 26 decibels. And I need to unsolo that. All right, so that's a little bit better. I had to turn it pretty far down there. And I actually wanted to turn down even further as soon as the music starts. So we kind of want to animate this. So we can do that. We can add keyframes using the pen tool here. So that little line that we've created there, we can just click, and you see those keyframes, those little diamonds that we're familiar with, are now on that line. So if I click and drag from that second diamond, it's not messing up, or the second keyframe, excuse me. If I click and drag that, it's not messing up anything from the first keyframe and before. So if I want to bring that all the way down, I can do that right here. And you'll hear it if I just solo it out, so you can hear just that clip. Now you don't have my microphone, so that might be really quiet, but you can see on my in my audio monitor that we go from being at minus 24 decibels, and it slowly dips out of there. So we can mix a considerable amount of our audio right here in the timeline. We can do that for the other track as well, if there's any spots that are a little bit too loud or a little bit too quiet. I think it's pretty much perfect up there, so I'm just going to leave that alone. There's something else that you should know about these keyframes on the gain on the timeline. If we right click these things, you can see that you can add an ease in or an ease out. And by doing so, you get these little handles, these Bezier handles. You can also add Beziers by right clicking and going to Bezier. And you get that same little handle. So this will help us kind of refine that shape. So it's not a very drastic, hard drop off. It's very smooth and fluid. So you probably won't be able to tell too much with this one. It is a little bit better there. But you'll really be able to tell if we're trying to do a hard cut out of a clip. So let's take a look at this one. And just for an example, we're going to hear this. He says something about Ilphonics. I can maybe turn this up a little bit for you. you can't hear anything. I'm just through a microphone here. But if I want to have fluid, if I want to have my sound cut out really fluidly and on a very particular moment, like as soon as he stops talking, what I can do is, a good method here is to put these two keyframes along a waveform area. So you see how that kind of slowly, or not so slowly, that kind of, there's a kind of hill on that waveform here. We can try to kind of match that shape. So if I add a Bezier, I can take my Bezier handle. And if you want to use an easy ease, that's fine as well. Okay, and now it kind of matches that shape. And if I listen to it, okay, and that can really help me if I'm working with some sound effects that are short, or I want to cut out some music, and I don't want that really very slow fade out. I want it just to cut off. That can really help me out. So I'm just going to Control Z and get rid of that stuff because I want to be able to hear my sound. Now there's a couple of other things in the timeline associated with sound that might be of interest to you. You can record voiceover. So this little microphone here, if I click that, you should be able to hear, or you should be able to record some voiceover for your track. If you wanted to record voiceover or maybe ADR or some Foley elements directly into the program, that is totally possible. If we go ahead and click that, it's going to give you a little countdown, and then I'm recording. And you can kind of hear me. Hopefully, we'll see. Okay, there it is. Now we can see my waveform for what I just said there, and I heard myself as I was recording, which isn't exactly ideal. There was a little bit of a delay there, which is not the best thing if you're trying to record some voiceover and stuff. So maybe you just kind of mute out that track as you're recording if you do experience some latency issues. So I'm just going to delete that. I certainly don't need that, but it is possible for us to record directly into the program. You can also record directly into the program via the audio mixer, which we will get to eventually. Also, if we right click any of these tracks, we'll see some options here for add track, add audio submix track, delete a track, which I bet you can assume what that does, add tracks and delete tracks. So if you click add track, it's going to add a new audio track, and it's going to conform exactly to your master. So we set our master to be 2 channels. So that means that the next track that we created, it's going to be 2 channels as well. If we click on add tracks, you have a little bit more versatility. You can add video tracks and audio tracks at the same time, however many you want. You can just type in a number, and then you can also set for where it's supposed to go. So if you want that to pop up on the very first track, you can add that there, and I don't need any more video tracks. But if I go ahead and press OK, now I have a brand new audio 1 track that doesn't have anything on it. I'm going to go ahead and press Control Z and get rid of that because I don't need that either. So there's a couple of other things. If you right click on these audio tracks, you'll notice voiceover record settings. So if you are going to do like the voiceover ADR or Foley directly into the program, you can adjust your settings here. You can make sure that your audio is coming through your microphone and maybe not your webcam mic or any other types of microphones that might be plugged into your computer there. You can also do the pre-roll and post-roll. So that you're recording a little bit early, and then you can adjust the countdown there as well. If we right click that same area and go to customize, you can also add some buttons to our audio tracks. You can add balance buttons, so if you want to move something left and right in the channel, so a stereo pan work, you can do that. You can do a track meter, so you can see the audio levels of a clip as it plays. Let's just do that for one of our options here. So for our music, let's add that track meter. If I expand my audio track now, I can see my track meter there. So if I play it back, I can see that track specifically, and not just the master audio. I can see these things separately, and because that's the only thing I'm hearing now, it looks exactly the same. And if I had a few of those keyframes in here, I wanted to jump to specific keyframes, I could do that just like I would in my effects panel. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those. Alright, so that's audio in the timeline, but there's also audio in all of these other places. So let's take a look at Essential Sound really quickly. So if I wanted to work with music, I could select music here, and it would give me options for music. The whole idea with Essential Sound, though, if I jump back real quick, you want to assign a certain kind of tag to something, and then Essential Sound is going to give you options for that specific type of stuff. So if we have dialogue here, we actually have a whole lot of options that we don't have elsewhere. So I'm going to go ahead and record a little bit of a voiceover track real quick. So this is me recording a voiceover track. All right, so I have a little bit of voiceover here, and if I listen to it, it sounds nice and clean, but if I wanted to adjust that in any way, I could click on dialogue, and now I'll have options for a bunch of different stuff. So loudness initially, if I turn this on, we can auto match that to other aspects of our audio. So if we have some music in there too, and we want it to be just as loud as our music and not get cut out by our music. Okay. I can also repair my audio if I have some kind of issue here. So I can reduce the noise. So that's for any kinds of light background noise. It can kind of help that just a little bit. Reducing rumble. This is specifically for things that happen in the microphone. So if you have plosives, so I'm just going to move my my pop filter here. This is a plosive, so you could hear that big puff of air when I hit that P with plosive. So if you have things like that, reducing rumble can help with that. Also things like microphone self noise. So lots of microphones have some noise, even if it's not recording anything in a room, there's some noise in your recording. That reducing rumble can help with that. De-hum will take out hum from your audio, go figure. So if you have any kind of maybe there's like a fan in the distance or something like that, you can kind of remove hum. DS is something that really helps with sibilance. So if you have hard S's in your like voiceover or dialogue track, almost everyone adds a DS to dialogue. So once again, removing my pop filter so you can hear what that sounds like. If I say something with an S sound, you hear the sharpness of those S's. So that's just raw audio. If I wanted to kind of cut that down a little bit, I could turn on the DS and then adjust from there. I can also reduce reverb, and I don't know how. I would highly recommend that you record your audio with as clean as possible, and then you can add reverb versus reduce reverb. Adding reverb is very easy. Reducing reverb can cause a lot of issues in your recording, right? Like people don't sound exactly the same as they would normally. So under clarity here, you have an option for dynamics, where you can make your it's all about dynamic range. So how loud and quiet your audio gets. It's like compression. So if you want your stuff to sound more natural or all compressed, you have options there. EQ is an absolutely essential element of audio editing. You can use these presets in here if you'd like to do some kind of major effect on your voice, but you can also just kind of sweeten certain areas of the voice. So the idea here is the low end frequencies, that's the bassier stuff that you hear in a voice or any sound, and then the high end frequencies, that's the higher pitch noises that you hear. You can boost those things to sweeten certain areas of a voice. If we turn on EQ here, it is very basic in how you can approach things. So we could do a subtle boost for a male, and it's going to lift a certain frequency range where it thinks that the male voice resonates. That said, everybody's voice is different, male, female, child. So I would highly recommend that you actually use an actual equalizer, like a parametric equalizer, and then find the resonant frequencies, turn those up and down from there. They do have all these like kind of fun presets and stuff too that actually could come in handy if you're trying to do something like someone's voice coming through a telephone or something like that. That's an option there. You have an option to enhance speech for male and female. Again, it's the idea is that it's boosting the frequencies that a male or female voice generally resonates with. I'm not sure how well it does, but you know, it's worth experimenting with, and it might work just fine for you. Okay, you can also add reverb, and this is pretty significant. You have a few options for presets here. Again, if you add like a convolution reverb, its own effect to any audio clip, and I'll show you how to do EQ at least when we get through Essential Sound here. Click, drag, and drop that on there. You'll have more options for plugins and more options with the reverb in general. This is kind of made more if we don't have a super firm grasp on these tools and we want to experiment in a way where there's not so many options and it's a little bit overwhelming and kind of difficult to work with. But these things aren't that difficult, and you can always check out a tutorial online on how to do any individual given effect with a lot more variables to it. So if you wanted to bust out those bigger effects. There's clip volume, and that's pretty self-explanatory. If we want to turn things up or down, it's right there. And we can also mute our track. So if I mute that track, it's going to be muted, and it's just the clip if I mute here. So it's not the entirety of the track. So my voiceover just isn't there anymore. I can also turn up my volume, not just in the timeline with the little rubber band that we have here, but if we right click, we can see audio gain. If I click on that, we can adjust the gain by a specific decibel level. We can also normalize our max peak. So the loudest point of my dialogue here, I could normalize to 0. So it's going to turn it up a little bit. But it's important to remember that sound is additive. So the more things you add, the louder your stuff gets. So if you have if I made my voiceover track mixed to 0 decibels, so that's as loud as we can go before we clip and we have distorted audio, and then we wanted to add music underneath that, it is going to clip. Any added elements on top of the sound that was already there will make everything louder. Also, if you right click in here, you'll notice that there is audio channels, and this can come in handy. Like my recording was mono, so there's only one channel, so it's going to come out of both speakers equally. But if you have some kind of audio source that's coming from left channel and a different audio source coming from a right channel, you can separate those things right here. So if we want both of the mono things that were recorded into the left channel to come out of both speakers, we could select both of those to be left channel. Essential Sound has other things too, though. If we clear audio type here, we have options for music. Less options here, though, but they are specific for music. All right, so let's pretend that our audio from the video that we had here is a music bed, and we can just assign the song from this music tag. And then we have options to add presets or save presets if we find something that we really like there. And we can do this interesting kind of thing. We can duck out our sound. So if we're ducking it against what element that is already tagged, and this is tagged as dialogue, so we want it to duck out for our dialogue. And then we can say, hey, how sensitive do you want it to be to duck these things out? How much can it duck things out? And how quick do you want the fades to be? So once you decide those things, you can click generate keyframes, and you can see that it made a couple of keyframes. If I zoom in, I can see what happens here. The sound is way up, and then it ducks down right before my dialogue comes in, and then it comes back up. So this is me recording a voiceover track. And then it comes back up. So that would work pretty well for us here, and then we could maybe adjust it with those keyframes and stuff, since we know how to work with that stuff on the timeline. So you can do that for any of these things. You can duck it against any of these other items too. You can duck it against other music and sound effects. So it just kind of makes room for your dialogue track or whatever other track you have there. You have those same things that we saw before for clip volume and mute, which do the same exact things for music as it does for dialogue. Now, if we click on the sound effects tab, we can see that we can add reverb to this and adjust the clip volume and mute. So very similar things again to dialogue. It just has less stuff to it. Ambience, again, some stuff that's very similar to music, where you can duck out your ambience to make room for, say, a dialogue track. You can also add reverb here, and you can adjust that clip volume, and you can mute it. Now, let's say you want to get a little bit more complicated than just working in the Essential Sounds tab here. So I'm just going to go over to the effects rack and search for EQ, and I should find a bunch of options for equalizers. There's a parametric equalizer. There are also graphic equalizers. Maybe an easy way to work is a graphic equalizer, and you can have multiple bands, maybe just 10 bands to make things easy. Okay, so once we add that equalizer, it's not going to do anything right off the bat, but if I head on over to my effect controls, if I just click that double arrow there, select effect controls, and then I click the clip that I've added my parametric equalizer to, I can then adjust my equalizer. So if I'm listening back to my music, I can find resonant frequencies, so that's my very basiest, the basiest part of the audio, and I can turn that up or down. And you can find certain areas of your music that you like. Okay, so it's as simple as working that way. You can also work with, say, the parametric equalizer, and it's a little bit of a different way to work. If I toss on parametric equalizer, that's going to do essentially the same thing. If I click on edit, I have a graphic interface here, and if I play it back, I can see how my sound is reacting to how my sound is reacting in the frequency range. So if there's a lot of sound coming through the bass, I can see that there, and that's probably where things are going to kind of resonate. Okay, and I can bring that down so the bassy elements of my audio aren't quite there, or I can really enhance it, or I can just notch it out just a little bit there. Where a parametric equalizer can really help your audio and your mix and stuff is if you do have some music and you have some music and you have some dialogue on top of that music, you can find the resonant frequencies of the dialogue and pull down those same frequencies in the music. Makes a little bit of room for clarity in that dialogue without really sacrificing a lot of volume in the music. So there are a ton of effects that you can do like this throughout your edits. And if you really want to get complicated with this stuff, you can actually jump your audio edit out into Adobe Audition, which is Adobe's sound editor. If you're familiar with that program, all you have to do is go to Edit, and then Edit in Adobe Audition, and then Sequence. If you want to do just a clip, if you wanted to add a specific effect that doesn't exist in Premiere but does exist in Audition, or you have a third-party plugin that isn't in Premiere, you can open just this one clip. And what's really cool about the Creative Cloud in general is that as you make adjustments in one program, they will update in another. So one more thing that I want to show you with audio, there is a ton of stuff in this program. We can look at the audio track mixer. So we have an audio track mixer, so we can do a lot of the same stuff in our track mixer as we did with the timeline. So we can mute, solo, and record specific tracks. You can see that those are still muted. We can also record. This was the track that I recorded that voiceover for just a moment. I can turn that off if I don't want to record. And then you can actually mix audio and stuff. You see these are mixed down. You can see that these two tracks are mixed down, but they're muted, so we're not really going to hear that too much. So if we played back and we played with these sliders here, we could see what happens. So if I'm playing back, we'll just mute out the audience track, and I can turn this down, and you can watch my audio monitor turn down and up. So just like we would with that rubber band and keyframes, we can mess with that stuff. Hey, there's my voiceover track. I could mute that out too. I can also pan left and right. You can see if I pan 100%, you have no sound coming through the left track. And if I go the other way, you have no sound coming through the right track. And if you do this at home, you'll hear your speakers go crazy. We do have some clipping audio, so maybe I can turn that down just a little bit. Now, if I wanted that stuff to be recorded into the track, it's not like something that we can't take away after the fact. We can move this read over to write. So if we change that over to write, all of the actions that we perform here are then going to be written into the keyframes. So let's go ahead and play it back. Since it's turned on. Right. Oh, wrong track. Let's try that again. So on right here, we turn it down. And then we can bring it back up. And stop it there. All right, so if I play that back real quick, I can see that my sound comes down and up. And it's adding some animation presets to the actions that I created there. Now, if I did something pretty well through my mix, but I wanted to maybe adjust it along the way, so if I bring that back and I like how it comes down, but I want to adjust after the fact and all through the end, you know, I want that to kind of stay the same too. I can select touch up here. So now I can adjust that so it comes right back up after the the first thing, and then after that it's going to do what it did before. We can also write in things like stereo pan. So if we want to switch that over to right, and we play back, we can move it from the left channel into the right channel, and back again, and back one more time, just so we can really see what's going on there. Okay, I'll take it back so we can play that through, and you can see that it's going to roll back and forth. All of that stuff is saved for us. Now, if there is one more option here under latch, which is very similar to write, except it's not going to do anything until we make an adjustment. And now all of a sudden it's doing all of that, all the left and right stuff that we had before. Just like we did before in the timeline, we can click on this button right here, Set Track Output Channel Assignments. If we want the same sound coming out of both speakers, we can toggle on the same sound that should come out of both speakers now. So it's mono sound coming out of both of your speakers like stereo. If we play that back. So that looks like the same exact thing until, you know, the left and right, the left and right animation that we created there. The last thing I want to show you in the audio track mixer is creating a sub-mix track. So if we add a track here, we can add just one sub-mix track. So we can go 0 here, and maybe added one video track. I just clicked a little bit too quickly there. But if I head on over now, I can see that there is one sub-mix track here. So if the idea is we have several audio tracks, maybe 6 different audio tracks, all for dialogue, and then we have music, we could have 4 tracks of music specifically, and we want to kind of mix all of the dialogue into its own track and mix all of the music into its own track. How we would do that is using submixes. So you see just above any audio track that exists, this thing, a little drop down here that says master, and if you hover over it, it says track output. We can output to submix 1, output to submix 1, output to submix 1. And now when we hear all of this audio coming through, we can see in our submix here that that we get all those levels. And now our submix output is to the master. The master is what we are actually exporting. So if we find that our stuff is clipping in our submix, we can turn that down. And you can see that while, let's get to a part where it's not jumping all over the place. You can see while this side is clipping, our submix is turned down, and our master matches our submix, because the only thing that's going directly into the master is that submix. So it's a way of bussing tracks together, if you're familiar with that from an audio editor. So there's a ton of stuff in Premiere, even beyond what we've seen in this tutorial. You could go even further and jump out into Adobe Audition if there's additional things that you want to do. A lot of the same stuff from Premiere is in Audition, but it's a little bit more user-friendly in how you can kind of control some stuff. But that is it for our lesson on audio in Premiere. We have one more lesson left, lesson number 8.